Mark my words, Earthlings, Erdogan's days are numbered. Hi, this is Atilla Yeşilada reaching out to you from sunny Istanbul. It's a beautiful day. The flowers in my backyard are blooming. Entire Turkey is blooming. Erdogan finally lost an election. And yes, the title may sound outrageously speculative to you because Erdogan has lost elections in the past and he has always rebounded like Mike Tyson after a good punch to the face. This time it's going to be different, and this is what I'm going to be discussing. It has been 15 days since Turkey's local elections have been held, but the expert community hasn't really recovered from the shock of AKP's incredible defeat, complete demise. And the debate is essentially on the point. Did Erdogan's mistakes lose the election for AKP and its ally MHP, or was it mostly the strategic acts and maneuvers by its arch-rival, CHP, that won the election? This is very important because if it is Erdogan's mistakes, they can be repaired. If it is what CHP did, it's much harder for Erdogan to match it. Now, I have carefully deliberated this issue in my incredible universal brain, and I have decided, even though Erdogan's mistakes have played a significant role, essentially, it is CHP's strategic genius that won the election. Moreover, and this is the second point, even if it is Erdogan's mistakes that lost the election, these are almost impossible to repair. Let me just summarize the election results and just tell you how stunning it is. If you look at Turkey's electoral map, you would see that large cities are largely divided between AKP and its allies, and CHP and its allies. And then there is this coastal region coming down from Istanbul to Izmir, all the way to Antalya and Hatay, which largely votes CHP. There is a south and east region, which is where the ethnic Kurds live, and that mostly votes for pro-Kurdish DEM party. And then the rest of the country is painted in blue, which is AKP's color, or its conservative nationalist ally MHP. If you look at the new election map, you would see that map, this contiguous region of AKP-MHP dominance that has covered the entire interior of Anatolia and the Black Sea, has been blotched by spots with CHP victories. It's not only that CHP resoundingly won Istanbul, Ankara, Izmir, Antalya, Mersin, etc., but it also won other industrial hubs like Bursa, Kütahya, Balıkesir, cities where CHP hasn't been present for like 50 years, like Kastamonu, like Amasya. These names would be familiar to you if you're following Turkey. If not, it doesn't make a difference. What matters is that imagine the American elections and the Republican candidate winning a completely blue district, a Democratic district, which was thought to be uncontested. And this happens not only in one district or in one state, but in several states. It's a sweep. It's really a trend change. First time in its history since 1977, CHP exceeded 30%, scoring 32%, and beating its arch-rival AKP by 2 percentage points, according to the national vote, as measured by municipal assemblies. These are really historic figures that attest to the victory of CHP. Now, the AKP, pro-AKP camp says, yeah, understood. But you got to remember, inflation was rampant, and this time the boss, Erdogan, didn't want a pork barrel because the budget was already in bad shape. He's a statesman. He understood that spending more money on the electorate would devastate the budget, perhaps doom Turkey to default. So he held the reins on spending, and which is what lost him the elections, which is to some extent true. In fact, many analysts would argue that had he given more lavish bonuses or pay hikes to Turkey's 17 million strong retirees, or raised the minimum wage for 40% of the workforce who are believed to be working for wages around the minimum wage, he would have won. I am not so sure. I think in addition to the miserable economic conditions, AKP also lost because of corruption and graft. Now, poverty is a miserable thing, but relative poverty is worse. What I mean by that is that people have become poorer, but they have also seen the municipality workers, members of AKP party, AKP mayors, and members of the assemblies, and AKP cronies get rich as they become more poor. This is what really antagonized them. It's not necessarily the fact that Erdogan didn't spend enough. It's the fact that he has created a regime where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And that is not based on merit, but on affiliation with AKP. Now, this is very important because if this is the reason, Erdogan can't easily change that. Simply because while corruption and graft exists everywhere, they're endemic to capital, endemic to any human-designed system. And in developing markets, countries like Turkey, you see more of that. But the difference is, imagine a tree surrounded by vines. They have a symbiotic relationship. The vines are parasitic and they feed on the tree, but both survive. In Turkey, the tree is corruption. The vines are people like us who are trying to make an honest living. In other words, corruption and graft is the main pillar of Erdogan's regime. This is how he sucks up the money from the economy and redistributes it to those key clienteles, to key constituencies, and to those who support his regime. You take that away, and there is no AKP left. 2, so let's assume I'm incorrect and Erdogan could have won if he has improved economic conditions. This is possible, but does anyone know how much pain it takes to solve Turkey's twin problems, namely rampant inflation and currency instability? Let me just focus on inflation. Turkey's inflation, according to official measures, is something like 70% per annum. According to what people on the street think, it's probably 80% or higher. For people to think that prices are stable in Turkish standards, this should decline to something to less than 20%. And there is only one way you can do that. It's called belt tightening. And not for a couple of quarters, but at least for a year, probably for 2 years. You really got to squeeze domestic demand and disposable incomes like a lemon to disinflate an economy where inflation has become just so violent, so rampant. Then, of course, at the end of belt tightening, there is a light at the end of tunnel. People do feel better. But no matter how much better they feel, they can never be compensated for the cumulative losses they have made during the belt tightening episode. In other words, belt tightening not only reduces disposable income, but it also expands the disparity between the rich and the poor. If Erdogan lost the election because the poor was getting poorer, disinflating the economy or solving the causes of currency instability is not going to help him win the elections. And this is, I think, where we are. Clearly, he also selected poor candidates. There is a new star in Turkey's wide range of Islamist parties called New Welfare Party, which is completely medieval. I mean, for them, women belong to home and kitchen with 3 children, etc. They hate the LGBTQ community. That party scored something like 7% of the national vote. Now, that party will continue rising, but it doesn't pose a threat to Turkey's regime. In fact, it's splitting the AKP vote. In the next elections, we will have a big AKP and not a very small New Welfare Party. And the way the Turkish electoral system is set up, New Welfare steals from AKP's members of the parliament. So the rise of new welfare is permanent, and it's a danger to AKP, not necessarily to the opposition. Now let's move on to the opposition side. What did CHP do to win these elections? It started with the previous chairman, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, which really made a lot of effort to breach the polarization of Turkey. CHP is the party of liberals, secularists, and Atatürkists, those who believe in the way of Kemal Atatürk. But during the Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu era, he tried to reach out to nationalists and to Islamists, to conservatives. He called it making peace with everyone and, just starting with a new slate. That wasn't found credible in the last May elections. He was then replaced with the current chairman of CHP, Mr. Özgür Özel, who broadened that approach. Now it's being thought as more credible. So much so that according to at least two polls that I have access to, 1.5 million AKP voters actually did vote for CHP. Now, in Turkish standards, this is sort of like a miracle. AKP voters vote for MHP, vote for new welfare. They may stay home. They may vote for center-right EIP. But for them to really go across the aisle all the way to the left and to vote for CHP is almost unbelievable. And that miracle was started by Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu and was made credible by Özgür Özel's policies. Of course, he has a star lineup of mayors and candidates. Mansur Yavaş in Ankara is a low-key guy who is not, a left-winger. He deals with everyone on equal footing, and he focuses on social services to his community. Ekrem İmamoğlu in Istanbul is also a maverick in the sense that he can be both left-wing, pro-Kurdish, and also, conservative. He has that knack for appealing to everyone, and he's also broadening his platform to run for the president in the next elections. These guys just swept Istanbul and Ankara. With, Mansur Yavaş won 60% of the vote. Ekrem İmamoğlu won 50% of the vote. But just focusing on them does disservice to mayors in boroughs of Istanbul and Ankara, which came from nowhere to end decades of AKP rule. In Istanbul, for instance, in three conservative districts, Eyüp Sultan, Beyoğlu, and Üsküdar, where young CHP mayors took over. Mayors in Bursa, Antalya, Manisa, etc., etc. You look at AKP. Sure, Erdogan selected poor candidates. But the bigger point here, the bigger conclusion that we need to draw is that he didn't have any access to better candidates. His talent pool is just so narrow. Anyone who joins AKP does so to make more money. This is not the case for CHP. It has become a party of vision, and young people are flocking to CHP because they think CHP can rescue Turkey. And CHP has a lineup of rookies and new stars which can govern Turkey for the next 20 years. This is a huge advantage for CHP. 3, CHP mayors, incumbents, did an excellent job of fighting poverty in their cities. Now, let's give credit to Erdogan where credit is due. Up until the pandemic, he created one of the most expansive and exhaustive welfare networks in the world. Honestly, everyone got something from the state if they were in need. Retirees, college students, widows, etc., etc. But because of the pandemic, that welfare network started developing holes. That came rampant inflation, and the welfare budget didn't keep up with it. It can't. Healthcare costs soared. So what happened is that hundreds of thousands of people were relegated from middle class to lower class and from lower class to poverty. With their limited budgets, CHP mayors reached out to these people. They opened soup kitchens. They provided school meals for kids, milk for kids. They even started campaigns to inoculate women against womb cancer. I'm sorry, I'm not being very woke, but it's not a disease that I encounter in my life. But They do these small things, not the huge projects like building new underground lines or opening bridges, but they do these small things that really touch the people, okay? And this is what's the difference between CHP and AKP. Having said all of these, is it certain that Erdogan would lose and CHP candidate, probably a criminal, will win? There is nothing Erdogan can do to win the next elections, but CHP can still commit two mistakes that may cause it the next election. First, it has won a lot of new municipalities, both at city and borough level. These are rich cities. There is a lot of money to be made. CHP mayors must stay away from graft and cronyism. If they manage that, they are 50% at the finish line. The second 50% is CHP needs to develop a national economic policy. It doesn't have one. Maybe it does have one, but it's not articulated. It needs to appoint a shadow minister to current economy czar Mehmet Şimşek, who explains how Turkey can reach economic stability and recovery without causing so much suffering to the poor. This is what center-left parties do. That person, hopefully a female, should propose policies that cure the current inflation and currency instability or current account deficit problem by causing minimal pain, by introducing progressive taxes, by going after tax cheats, by introducing new social welfare policies while cutting the budget in items which are frivolous spending at this time. I'm not so certain CHP can do that. So there is still a margin of doubt in my view. But, you look at these things, every politician, no matter how brilliant they are, how charismatic they are, peak at some point. And then if that country has even a semblance of fair elections, they lose. And I think Erdogan has reached that stage. To be concrete, I think he will call early elections in 2027 and he will lose. And his party, AKP, and its ally, MHP, would lose the majority to CHP and probably an alliance of smaller parties. Thank you very much. I enjoy your comments. Please do engage with me. I try to answer all of your comments unless, they are so off the left wheel, I don't know what to say. And if you like it, share and subscribe. I want to thank Bahceli Economy for co-producing this video, and this has been a broadcast by Real Turkey channel presented by Atilla Yaşalara.